If the Conservative government feels that it is picking a justified fight with the nurses and the ambulance men over this current period of strikes, and if it sees in this a sort of parallel to the strikes with the coal unions that dominated the earlier part of Mrs. Thatcher's tenure, then I think it's on a hiding to nothing. First of all, there is a big difference between Mrs. Thatcher and Rishi Sunak in terms of leadership. Secondly, the Thatcher government was well prepared to hold out during the strike. Thirdly, the moral significance was high, but certainly not as high as it is here. The weight of the moral high ground is with the nurses and the ambulance people. Now, we may look back at the miners' strike and see this as the nadir of the Thatcher era, and as something that destroyed, fractured our country, and tarred the north of the country, particularly, and destroyed so many of the coal mining communities. This is absolutely true. And the question must be: was there another way of Thatcher making her authority felt over the unions, who had run ransack over the previous Labour government of Wilson and Callaghan? Did Thatcher pick the right quarrel? It's questionable. But Rishi Sunak, if he thinks this is the right quarrel, is absolutely and fundamentally and unreservedly wrong. This is the wrong quarrel. It is outrageous that the NHS, the people who are working for the NHS, that is the people who are actually working for the NHS, not the bureaucrats who are pushing pencils around a piece of paper, but the people who are actually doing the work. These are the future of the NHS. These are not people who we can appease with clapping, or indeed who deserve to simply be clapped. No, they need the resources to do their job. These people are highly skilled. They are the people who support the NHS. These are the people who we meet and interface with when we go to stay in hospital, when we are treated by the NHS. These are the people who need to be properly paid. Not only properly paid, but properly parked as well. Nurses have been treated appallingly over the last few years. I don't think this is specifically about government plans to run down the NHS. I think this is partly about the desire of bureaucrats to put more money in their own pocket and less in the pocket of the people who are actually doing the work. As you know, I don't have high regard for bureaucrats. If bureaucrats got it right, then there wouldn't be so many mistakes running around the NHS. The mistakes are almost always bureaucratic, and more than that, the bureaucrats still don't do their work. They delegate so much of the day-to-day work to doctors and nurses who are already overstretched. So it's doctors who write back to patients who complain. It's nurses who fill in all the forms. What are these bureaucrats doing? There's so many of them, they're so well paid, and they seem to do so little. We don't need all these bureaucrats eating up the bulk of the money in the NHS. What we need is resources, and we need to give the nurses and the doctors who do the work security and dignity. And anything less than that is wrong. And while Rishi Sunak is prepared to turn a blind eye to people who are dodgy in their tax returns, to turn a blind eye to people who have accusations of bullying levelled against them, to turn a blind eye to people whose language is immoderate, while he's prepared to do all this, and he's not prepared to listen and to respond to the nurses and the ambulance drivers who are on the front line, who are on the cutting edge of the NHS. The NHS needs reform badly, but before we can even get to discussing reform and how that reform is going to take place, it needs to be respected. You don't respect people by treating them cheaply, by clapping them, those people who were taking the burden of the pandemic and calling them heroes and then not giving them money. You're capable of giving money to the Royal Bank of Scotland. You're capable of giving money to banks who fiddled the system and then look for a handout. You're capable of giving these people money, and you're not capable of giving money to the people who on a daily basis are working huge hours to save people's lives. You've got your priorities wrong, Mr. Sunak. It's time you listened to the needs of others.